Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Betty Osei Gold, the program's assistant for Green Africa Youth Organization. To you all, welcome. I'm hopeful that at the end of this webinar, your expectations will be met. It's a pleasure to serve as a co-moderator for today's event, which is themed International Perspectives on Waste Reduction, Food Systems, and Sustainability Efforts. This is spearheaded by Concordia University Compost, known as UC Compost, and Green Africa Youth Organization, GAYO. The issue of global food loss and waste reduction represents a potential opportunity to enhance both food security and environmental sustainability. And therefore, this has received considerable attention, thus this webinar. Today, we are joined by 4 international speakers from Switzerland, Ghana, Nigeria, and Canada. They will be sharing with us their experiences on sustainability efforts. To my audience, do well to include your questions and comments in the Facebook live chat, because this will be addressed during the question and answers session. To serve as the main moderator for today's event, we have in person a CBC Radio anchor from Quebec. She's a champion for waste reduction and composting who leads by example. Kindly help me welcome Joanne Bayly.
Thank you, Betty. I'm here now. I think I'm going to introduce all of the panelists. We'll start, I guess, at the very top. Thank you. I'll start with introducing our panelists. We'll start with Keroles, who is here in Montreal. Now, I'm on my wrong document, sorry. He is very active at Concordia University. In fact, he started the composting program there. His program is called Waste Not, Want Not. And since the beginning of this program, which is really amazing, 4 years ago, the number of people or how the students at Concordia have managed to reduce the compost that they generate by about 2 months each year. So quite a bit. You're also a PhD candidate and a public scholar. So Keroles is very impressive up there in the top left corner. Then I'll go down to Abdul. Abdul Tahir Hamid is a computer science expert who has become a climate activist. He's also the CEO of the Global Youth Climate Action Initiative from Nigeria, rich academic and professional experience. And his mission is to improve climate change. Our next speaker is, sorry, I don't have these in order, Joshua Amponsem has an MSc in the Geography of Environmental Risk and Human Security from the United Nations University Institute. He was named the World Climate Ambassador by the Climate Interactive Group. He is the leader of Betty's group, the Green Africa Youth Organization, or GAYO, and some of their projects include Trees for Biodiversity, which I'm sure he'll tell us about later. And also we have on the bottom right there, we have Marie-Claire Graf in Switzerland. And Marie-Claire is pursuing an MBA in Leadership and Sustainability. She was a UN Food Systems Champion. She is the president of the Swiss Associations of Student Organizations for Sustainability, and she's an ambassador in the Real Food Systems Movement. And she's here to tell us how students there in Switzerland are improving the situation. And I think we're going to start by just having, it's a casual conversation, but maybe we'll start by everyone just talking about how their composting sustainability systems are working. What's working? Why don't we start with that and start with Keroles?
Thank you, Joanne. So as you mentioned, we have I've started this Waste Not, Want Not initiative at Concordia that is started as a collaboration between the administration at Concordia and students and professors. And the idea is that the administration would improve the infrastructure that exists in place, so making compost bins more widespread and more available to students. And the administration delivered on that. We went from 9 compost bins to over 100 that's available now. And students would would help people learn how to sort out their waste and how to compost. And so since we started, annual composting has doubled, so we went from 43 metric tons to about 92 2 metric tons. You can go to concoriacompost.ca/data to get all those numbers. And overall waste, so this is recycling plus composting plus landfill, so everything's being generated on campus, has actually decreased by 16% per person every year. And so we're very proud of that, and right now we're hoping to really scale this up and replicate that work in other places. And I'm very happy to learn from so many people here in this chat that are from Africa and Switzerland and Ghana and Nigeria, to really learn how we can learn, and like how what they are doing and what it is that we can apply, and how we can work together in the future and keep these conversations going and better connect our communities. So I'm eager for this chat.
Maybe we'll go to Abdul next. Abdul, what's your focus these days? If you unmute yourself.
Of course, I'm going to give you a brief of our organization and what we are offering in respect of waste management.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we go to Joshua next then? What's your focus these days?
Hello, everyone. Nice to get the chance to talk about composting waste management. Also to be on the panel with Kiro and Abdul and Marie-Claire as well. My focus these days have been sort of integrating circular economy into the waste management sector for peri-urban communities. And this means that most of the waste generated in peri-urban communities in Ghana, particularly also the sub-Saharan African region, still has around 65% of this waste being organic waste, which presents a huge opportunity for redirecting the waste from landfill sites, which are not even existing. So let's say dump sites, where the only way to reduce the volumes of these waste is to set them on fire, which generates a lot of air pollution for communities that stay nearby. So this has been sort of a very dying reason why there is an urgency to divert such waste into composting. What we're doing on that front is sort of to be able to first separate the waste, of course, which is very, very important, but also the infrastructure is not ready to be able to practice separation and segregation as you see in some parts of the world. So the approach has been working with clustered areas or hotspots areas like market spaces to be able to consolidate the organic waste much easier and be able to take them to a material recovery facility or a facility where this can be processed into compost, as well presenting an opportunity for the plastic sachets, which is very common in the developing world because of packaging in smaller quantities, which makes it more affordable for everyone to be able to access, but also presenting an opportunity for these sachets to have a sort of a second life by artisanally or through arts convert these plastics into other useful products. In terms of composting specifically, it's not been easy. And I say it's not been easy in two ways. One is you can, of course, do the composting on a smaller scale, household, backyard garden, brilliant. If you consolidate and want to do it for a bigger community, you need infrastructure. You need to have a certain level of technique to make that possible. And also, if you want people to engage in this as an everyday business, then you need the economic argument for why the economic model to support this, to make it more feasible for others to work with this. And that translates into a faster maturity rate for the compost production. And there it's getting to the techniques of composting and the different methodologies. But first step, we need to move the waste from being burnt, being polluted, into other useful purposes, which is then converting into compost for farming. I will pause here before we get into more deeper conversations on composting. Thanks.
Thank you, Joshua. Well, we'll get into the challenges later, I'm sure, but let's just go to Marie-Claire now, and maybe she can talk about what her focus is these days, what you're thinking about, what you're working on.
Yeah, thank you so much also for hosting and facilitating, moderating this panel. It's a great pleasure to be here. So myself, I'm really concerned about nature and about the glaciers and about the beauty we are having here in Switzerland and how it is all melting, about the climate crisis. And when seeing all of this disastrous news, I think it's very important to focus on solutions. And one of the biggest solutions is transforming our current food system, which is like not circular and which is not like human centered and which is also not good for our planet and for the climate and for biodiversity. So I'm focusing a lot on the transformation of our current food system on a very local level, but also nationally and internationally, also with the upcoming Food Systems Summit, where I'm serving as one of the champions, and as well as the Real Food Systems movement, empowering young people to be advocates for change. And also when we are talking about the food system at different angles, I mean, there is a part about education, there's a part about women empowerment, there is a part about the waste management. And I think it's very important to bring this all together and listening to each other. And there is also the platform, the Sustainability Week is providing to exactly focusing on these solutions right at the universities, because I believe, and all the other members of the Sustainability Week believe, that the universities have a very, very crucial role to play in this transformation, because they have been historically the center of knowledge. They are still like a center of knowledge today, and also a hub for creating solutions. And they also have a lot of credibility in our society. Nevertheless, despite they're actually producing all of these very devastating reports and analysis about where we are heading to, there is still not like an urgency to act within the universities. And there's also, for example, comes to like not having compost facilities, not having sustainable food alternatives, not having good waste management tools, and so on. So our goal is really to transform as well the way universities are working today. And so these are like some of my focus, what I'm doing currently, and I'm very, very happy to hear more of the discussion.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I wonder if anyone has noticed or what changes you were seeing because of the pandemic, because of coronavirus. Are things worse? Are they better?
Yeah, so we actually have, I posted a poll a few months into the pandemic asking if people have noticed their personal waste increasing or decreasing because of the pandemic and staying home. And actually 60% of them have seen their waste increase, 40% have seen their waste decrease. And the reason, we had about 168 votes in there and about 50 comments. And one of the things that people refer to is the fact that coffee chains, for example, don't accept reusables anymore, or bulk stores don't accept you to bring your container because of the pandemic. And there's a lot of this concern about reusables transferring COVID, which is very unjustified. So there was a statement by some 100-something scientists from all over the world saying that the reusables don't carry any more risk than disposable cups. All what you need in both cases is basic hygiene. So there's nothing that, those disposable cups have been touched by other people as well. They're not any cleaner than reusable cups. You just need basic hygiene in all cases. However, on another poll that we've posted looking at food waste specifically, because people are staying home, they don't do a lot of impulse buying as much. I mean, there's impulse buying online as well, that happens, but also they cook at home, and the food waste is decreasing. So actually, a lot of sources of food has been decreasing. Because people are going back and checking their habits that are taking place because of the autopilot that we lived before the pandemic. And I think in some ways this pandemic is a way for us to self-check on what habits we have and what ways we can decrease waste. And I think we just need also better policies and that are outside to allow people to go back to using reusable cups and containers.
Thanks, Carol. Joshua, do you think maybe with the pandemic, people are sort of looking differently at the environment, that just sort of looking at the bigger picture? They're stuck at home, they're thinking about the world. Do you think maybe that would be helpful for the environment?
Certainly yes. I say yes in two perspectives. One is on what we're trying to talk about today with food and food waste and the food systems in general. I think one thing that has become clear is people getting more used to the art of having to cook, especially in very busy urban context where you're very used to fast food pickups, takeaway. and all that. Of course, there's still online purchasing of food. I'm not going to sort of deny that, but it's also getting people to actually cook. People took hobbies in gardening, which was awesome, and getting to get more closer to nature, not from the parks and walking and having the green scenery, which is amazing, but also people really getting their hands, say, dirty in terms of planting their own food, harvesting, and feeling a bit more sort of a relief in doing these acts. And I think that was very principal. And I've seen a couple of articles, scientific articles, which already trying to sort of emphasize the psychological impact of people partaking in these activities during the lockdown, whether they feel alone, whether they feel trapped, not being able to go out, but the act of growing their own food, caring for a plant, a crop, harvesting, that whole process, which most people did not get the chance to do for the past, say, 10 years because of the kind of job you do, because of your busy schedules. And I think that has really shown a new face of what life really means in terms of how we relate to nature, and sort of shifting the narrative a little bit from, oh, I'm going for a walk in the park, I'm going for a walk in the garden, oh, it's nice to sit by the beach, to also partaking in the activity of growing food and not just seeing nature as the one side of it where it's just nice to see, but also being part of growing, taking care, cultivating. So that was very, very important. And I think it comes along with a certain level of satisfaction of harvesting your own food and cooking it. I think that also has had impact on how people saw food in general as not just something you pick up on the shelf, but something that you can actively partake in. And I think one thing that is worth highlighting is that of course, the pandemic itself is increasing waste in a certain context, is reducing waste in a certain context, as Keroles said, but nutrition is one bit that has also become something that we're becoming more aware of, that it's not just about picking up supplements from the pharmacy or getting recommendation on which supplements to take, but also paying more attention to what kind of food you really eat, what are the nutritional values, and how do you keep yourself healthy and build a better immune system against any disease at all. And to have a pandemic that is global, everyone talking about it and talking about health and safety and well-being, it puts a lot of things to get people to really think around their everyday actions, which build their immunity from a more natural perspective than getting a combination of chemicals from a pharmacy, and naturally eating food that helps you to build your immunity and get nutritional values. So there are I think there are a lot of lessons and awareness and things that we become more aware through the pandemic period. The bigger question is if we're gonna take these lessons and move it forward, or pandemic goes down and we return back to this fast life we live, which we just buy something on the street and we eat and we move ahead because we have a job to do and all of that. Yeah.
Thanks. Marie-Claire, I wonder if you wanted to add to this, and also maybe you might talk about your new global initiative you're involved in. It's called the One Better World Collective. Is there sort of a connection there?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just when I started, I completely agree with everything what was said before. Especially, I think the whole health aspect didn't really matter in this whole discussion. I mean, the climate crisis is a health crisis. The biodiversity crisis is a health crisis. And now we are like facing, like we cannot escape anymore that like the corona crisis again is a health crisis, but it's like interconnected to all of the other crises. And I think this has got now really, really like put on spot, and people started to care about their health. And as Josh also already mentioned about like what they're eating, how they're eating, and really so again value in spending time with food. And also like then when you're spending time with food, I mean you also care somehow like very naturally about the waste. And also going to nature. I think like I have been doing some interviews on like what people are missing or what actually the corona crisis gave them, and most people mention like being again connected to nature, having a walk in the forest, and being connected. And I think this is so beautiful that we are revaluing these very fundamental things, which are cheap, which are not available to everyone around the planet, but at least to many people. And yeah, I think this is an action we can do. And this is also like when One Better World comes in, this is really trying to tackle the current issues from a different level, because we have been trying to tackle it from a from a scientific perspective, from a natural scientific perspective. You have trying to bring all the most brilliant experts together and work on solutions. We have like the economy trying to create new technologies, whatever, to save the planet. And I mean, the curve is still going, all of the curves are going the wrong direction. And it's getting really, really scary. And I think this is exactly, I mean, we should have, of course, started already way earlier, but this is also like, I mean, the initiative already started way earlier, of course. But so where we're coming in with a more mindful approach and trying to value or trying to reassess the current value system. And I think this is really important because there is like a very famous quote from Einstein that you cannot solve the issue, like you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking you were heading into it. And it's exactly the point. Even if you have the most brilliant people all coming together, it's impossible to find a solution in the current way we have been doing business, we have been doing politics, we have been doing education, we have been doing everything. And that's why I think this more mindful, personal approach addressing this crisis is a very good way, and I do hope that we can reach many more people, that they also are doing this inner change and try to find this inner fulfillment, rather than just like overconsumption. I mean, today is like, I think, Cyber Monday or something. I don't really care, but like last Friday was like the Black Friday. I mean, like just trying to fill yourself with like external things instead of like being the lamp and being the light which you carry within. And I think this is so important for all of this, what we are trying to do.
Thank you. So if we look at these issues that seem to be the same everywhere, what are the new kind of technologies, or how will technology contribute to this? Kero, do you have any thoughts on that, on the technologies, or do you think it's more we have to do more and not rely on technology? How do
I think fundamentally it's a social problem with waste and a climate crisis. So I mean, technology has a role to play and it can help, but fundamentally it's a social problem. And I think this is part of what we have seen at Concordia. So before Waste Not, a few years before, the university decided to increase compost bins in every floor of the major building where people are having classes. So back when I was an undergrad, like 100 years ago, every floor had a compost bin. And the community, including myself, didn't actually know how to use those compost bins. And so they were so contaminated by things like plastics and coffee cups, things that are not compostable. And so they were very contaminated. And so the university had no choice but to take them away. So it's not a question of just infrastructure and technology. It's really important because, you know, I can talk about composting from here to the moon. And if I don't have compost bin, it's not going to work. But fundamentally, it's a social problem. And so what we're learning is that when you help people take the first small steps of sorting their waste properly, they will take the bigger steps of reducing their waste. And so technology is almost a gateway to more meaningful behavior change. And so what I think the pandemic is actually, just to go back into that point, what I think it has helped us realize is that this whole idea of that change takes time and behavior change is hard, these kind of hypnotizing statements are just not true. Clearly, change doesn't take that much time. You just look at how much change we've had through the past couple of months. And so drastic change is actually possible in a very short amount of time. And what's needed is the political will to treat a crisis as such. And so this is a social problem. It's not just about technology. I think technology will have a role to play, but fundamentally it's about people making the right choices and pushing for the right choices. So there's always this debate about how much I can do as an individual, and there's a lot we can each do, but it's also about the choices we make and what we buy and who we vote for to push for more systemic changes in industries that is actually responsible for the majority of waste, and in the political systems as well. So I think, so just the answer is that technology has a role to play, but it's not the main solution here.
Thanks. Now, Joshua, Kero tells me that Canadians are the worst when it comes to waste, the most amount of waste per capita in the world. And so we're wondering, what can Africa teach Canada about not creating so much waste?
A good question to the wrong person, I guess, because I'm not impressed with the waste management in Africa either. So
I'm also reading that a lot of waste is being sent to Africa. Well,
I think the challenge is, yes, per capita we are not producing much. In terms of capacity to manage, we don't have that. right? And I think what we need to understand is that the technologies are there for managing waste in so many different contexts. But if you don't have the technology, do not preach the same waste management system as someone who has the technology. So Sub-Saharan Africa has been teaching in schools recycling and putting so much emphasis teaching in schools recycling. Meanwhile, we didn't have the technology for that, which means that you are seeding the minds of many people to believe that whatever product they have, if they drop it, there is a solution for whatever thing they are dropping. But that solution was not there. At the same time, we had the opportunity that the amount of time we committed to teaching recycling could have just gone into reduction and just reduce as simple as possible, because the capacity is not there in terms of money, in terms of the technology, it wasn't there. And I think this is something that is increasingly not satisfactory, but it's increasingly coming up that people are beginning to accept that recycling is not a solution. And the only way we can actually deal with this is just reducing the volumes of waste we generate. In that context, whether the solution is there or not, whether there's an approach to manage it or not, you are still on the better side than actually polluting and thinking that there will be a way to clean it up. I think the other thing is, which I find very interesting about my own, where I come from, where I grew up, is the art of just dropping things on the floor. And this was ideal at a certain point, because everything that you drop on the floor would be picked up by the chicken, by the dog, by the sheep, by the goat. It was ideal. I mean, it was very simple that if I have a bowl of rice and I eat half of it, and my chicken are already, all this hen and all around me, so they are literally eating with me. So that growing up in an environment like that of just spilling things on the floor and having animals pick it up was great. And then I think around the 2000s, after the 2000s, we started having cases in my own community where some of the goat and sheep would die from chewing plastic sachets, right? Because there was food in the plastic sachet which they tried to get, and then they died from it. And then you get to realize that you have a culture, a certain practice, which was ideal for a certain period of time because of what resources you were using. And then the transition into using plastic made that very difficult, right? And then you have to understand that every era requires a different approach in lifestyles, in dealing with situations. And this is why, we don't judge cultures, but it's also really relevant to realize that we are all in a big mess right now at a global level, and cultures evolve and adapt and learn and grow, and we need to learn and unlearn. And at some point, you need to realize that the practices which were ideal 20 years ago are not ideal now, and we need to change to be able to foster new practices that help the community at large, at the local level, but also at the global level. And in saying this, I say that Africa has a lot to learn from the outside world in general, in terms of best practices. And at the same way, the outside world also has a lot to learn from Africa in terms of best practice. And I use the US as an example, because when I visited the US, I saw that everything comes with a very huge package. So very big packages of everything. And then you end up wasting more because you don't finish these products and probably they hit expiry dates. So you get a lot of things, not just the containers being disposed, but also with content in it being disposed. And at some point, you need to strike the balance between how much of something you need versus how much is available at the supermarket. So if there's 10 kilograms of something available and you only need 5 kilograms, you are forced to buy 10 kilograms just because that is what is available, right? And this is something that we can learn in sort of making things in smaller quantities so we don't waste it. And then Africa could also learn of making those packaging more sustainable. And here I really agree with Kiro that the responsibility is not on the individuals, because if I buy anything, I'm paying for the content, not the packaging. If I buy washing powder, if I buy, corn flakes, if I buy whatever, I'm buying what I'm going to consume, not necessarily the packaging that comes with it, right? But then I'm forced to accept the packaging that comes with it, because this is the only way I can access the product I want to pay for. And hence it becomes a really, really big responsibility on the industry. So, there's been extended producer responsibility. There's been other initiatives that are seeking to tackle this, but they are all very weak at this point because it gives the industry so much luxury, so much. They have the money, they have the technology, they could invest more. But I feel like there is not enough pressure on the industries at the policy level to transform this, and rather we end up blaming the consumers, each other, in a context that the industry just sit back and keep showing on the unnecessary marketing on the screens, always showing how to spend, how to consume, and we end up blaming the individual consumers rather than tackling the industry and making sure packaging is right. Policies are set that you can't just put anything on the shelves. And I think we'll get a bigger or faster rate on changing the waste production pattern if you're able to change the packaging sector from the consumable industry. Yeah.
Thanks. So if the industry and the governments aren't doing anything, you're all involved in universities. I wonder if you think that universities play a big role in changing how things are done. Marie-Claire, do you think universities could make a big difference?
Of course they do, and this is also exactly why the Sustainability Week started, and they still like centered around the universities, because as mentioned before, I mean, they have been historically seen as a driver of change in society, also for technology, but also like our social habits. I mean, many also like the economy, many like startups, companies started out of university ideas, so they absolutely do have the place in society to be a driver of change. And I mean, they are. I don't want to like neglect this, but they should, in my point of view, really focus on this existential crisis and only provide solutions as such, and not. I mean, there are still a lot of universities still financing very old-fashioned technologies, are still financing. I mean, also like not sustainable, not circular economy driven processes and products. And I think there we really need to take a cut and say, okay, like now we are really focusing on the solutions. And also I think what is really important, like we talked about it before already, about the true cost pricing, because if we have a true cost pricing, then I think many things would change much faster also for the individuals. And there I think it's as well very important that the universities are not only trying to tackle it from a scientific perspective, only like, okay, now we have this package and our material experts have been checking it, but also we need the social sciences to see like how this actually fits into our like social and inequality, like our social system, if like based on a lot of inequalities. I mean, Kiro, you mentioned it in the beginning. I mean, of course there are some shops where you can for example, shop plastic free without packaging, but as long as they are like placed outside of the cities and are very expensive, and it's just not possible to reach it in like your daily like field of where you're anyway active when you go to work or picking up the kids or whatever. I mean, it's not going to be mainstreamed, and I think there it's really important that the universities also do their bit on the social sciences. And yeah, basically it needs a commitment from the universities to be a driver of change, and the change in the right direction. And many universities still are rather old-fashioned, very hierarchical, very also patriarchal, so they are not yet over this threshold of going into the future. And this is exactly what we want to tackle, because we do believe that the students are a driving force behind this change, and if we are strategic and organized very well, we can make these changes happen on a very like local level, like for example having compost facilities, having courses about sustainability, having more research, but also really bringing it into the policy level. I mean, you mentioned, both of you mentioned already, I mean, like really changing how political systems are done, how regulations are done, and showing that actually these regulations are the future and everything else is actually a crime against humanity. And I think also the universities should get, I mean, they have to back it up all by science, but we have to get more vocal. It's no longer good enough to be like, just sit back and describe very boringly like some graphs which are actually showing that humans are going to be extinct. I mean, we just cannot have this situation anymore where it's all like a movie and we just think like we can just like press the stop button, or like, and we can go like back. But we have to face it, and universities have a lot of credibility in society, and they have to use it for the good for us. And I do hope we make this change, and I do think we make the change. The question is just how fast, because every day we are losing is a day which is lost. And again, like it's an exponential curve, as with Corona crisis. The day we are like now missing out actually makes a huge difference at the end.
Okay, thanks. But Kiro, I think you're actually trying to pull out from Concordia into the wider community to spread what you've learned. How is that going? What's your plan?
Yeah, so we actually just created a spin-off company trying to replicate that work in other institutions, and scale up sort of citywide or provincially or nationally, one step at a time. But the idea is that these places, like universities and institutions, are places where there's a large congregation of people where broad impact education really works and makes a difference. Because like what Mary Claire was saying about shopping at plastic-free shops, you don't need 10 people going perfectly zero waste. It's not going to make a difference. What you need is thousands of people trying, and even if they're making mistakes, you still need thousands of people trying. So these places where you have a large congregation of people and you can make a broad impact is where the work has to happen. And looking at university, for example, Concordia has launched its sustainability action plan a couple of weeks ago that includes a curriculum component. The problem is at Concordia, only 9% of students that graduate out of the university actually has any mention of sustainability in their curriculum and their programs, which is very small. And the majority of those 9% come from engineering undergraduate programs because they're required by accreditation to learn about sustainability. They cannot practice as engineers in Quebec if they don't learn about sustainability. But most of other programs don't get to learn about the climate crisis, which is a big problem. And so when a plan comes out and say, okay, we're going to increase the amount of sustainability in curriculum, it's not a commitment, it's a brush off. What you need is an institutional commitment that every student at Concordia will learn about sustainability. And actually, we need this in a national scale so that everybody can learn because the climate crisis affects everybody and everybody has to be able to contribute no matter what their field is and what their career is. So I think this is it's just very important, and I'm having a lot of thoughts to what everybody was saying, because it's really about scale. It's no longer about few people just doing everything perfectly. It's about scale and getting everybody to vote properly and to create the market forces that are needed to pressure industry to do that, to take this seriously.
Well, does anybody? Maybe we should start thinking about if you could make one positive change, Joshua. What would you like to see around the world? Just one.
One, just one. Quite a hard choice. Just one. Well, I think my one desire right now, wish right now, would actually be to see radical young activists in a position of power in politics. I think that could make a lot of difference. So I'm not going to focus on the thematic things we need, but I really believe that having young people really dynamic into the climate activism, environmental activism, understand the issue, being in power, that will mean a lot, because then we could have radical decision-making, transformative decision-making happening at a faster rate, and cutting on a lot of the blah, 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 and getting right into action. So that would be one thing that I would
sort of a Greta Thunberg takes over the world.
Well, looking forward to that.
Marie Claire, what do you think? That
I mean, I completely agree, but I have another point I can add. So we have already 2 points. I really believe that the current financial system, I mean, like many of these ideas are not too costly, but still there is like so much financial flows going in the wrong direction, trying to keep the system as it's going today. And the system is like crumbling down and it's breaking down. And many people see this, and it has already causing devastating effects for humans and nature. And if the financial system is going to change, it will have like so much power, and it will actually like have this ripple effect, and will go so fast that probably like many of us will be like overwhelmed. But still, we need to have this happen. I mean, this is the transformation, and unfortunately our whole society is based around money. So I think like money will be the main driver, and what I would love to see is that the companies, the banks, the foundations, the pension funds, the universities, the state banks, and all of this are making this transformation because it's going to matter for them. Because I mean, like, first on a deaf planet, I mean, like, all this money doesn't have any worth, and all of the investments which are going into fossil fuels, I mean, if you have to be net zero by 2050, I mean, all of this is like nothing. There is like no word. It's like zero, right? So they have to change. And if I have one wish, I would like I don't know exactly how, but like we have to convince all of these people, maybe through radical young people being in these positions, as Joshua mentioned, of really like changing the financial flows, because then I'm like very, very convinced that we're going to make it in time.
Maybe just maybe a final comment from Keroles then. So we're going to overturn politics right away. We're going to overturn the financial system. There is a new government in the United States, which might be a ray of hope. Is there anything you can end on optimistically? I mean, you say progress can happen very quickly. Do you see that happening because of changes?
Yeah, so I mean, not only have we seen this because of COVID, but it's, you know, the biggest waste reduction that happened because of waste not happening in the very first year. And all the work after that was to sustain and grow that impact. So I don't think it's that difficult. It's really just a question of will. And what I would like people to learn is to get better at holding people accountable and seeing through the greenwashing, because there's so much out there that's just pure greenwashing, and it's only going to get worse because companies are seeing the climate crisis being a bigger issue for everybody, and they're trying to benefit financially out of it. And so, you know, they're seeing as a branding exercise, which we should really be very careful about, and just make sure that we see the greenwashing and call it out and hold people accountable, that the people that engage in this kind of behavior. So an example for, like, in Canada, there was sorry, I have a problem with my back. But in Canada, a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago, they announced that they're having a plastic ban that's going to start next year on some items of single use, and City of Montreal also had their zero waste plan announced, and Quebec had their starting to revamp their consignment assessment, and all these things are great. But what often happens when I have these conversations with other institutions trying to replicate the work of Waste Not, and I bring this up, and they say, well, they have said that before, we've heard that before. And so we also have a big credibility problem, because nobody really believes that the government is serious. And if they don't believe it's serious, they're not going to do it. And so that will create all kinds of issues. And so we have to be very careful of how we hold people to account to deliver on the commitments that they have made and actually do what they said they will do. And also on the flip side, make sure that we're not falling trapped by greenwashing, and making sure that when people say that this is a fact, it's actually a fact. And when people say this is a product that's environmentally friendly, it's actually environmentally friendly. And we do have a legacy of climate hypocrisy, right? And all kinds of commitments that were made that were not delivered on. And so how do we make sure that conversation like this one is continue, and we talk about specific issues of how people are saying that we are so green, please buy our product and give us money, when they're actually not. And so I think there's a big role there from citizens and from people and from journalists like you, Joanne, and from activists like Joshua and Marie Claire and Abdul, and I think we just have to keep working.
Okay, well, little bit of optimism, follow up. I think we're still. Betty, did you want to remind people they can ask questions?
Okay, that's well said. You can just do that for me. I'm sure when you're done, then we would have the questions in the chat.
Okay, so what haven't we talked about? Marie Claire, when you've traveled, what do you see the difference in where you live? You live in very Europe. You live in the middle of a very, I guess, urban area. What sort of lessons do you think you could learn from places like Africa?
Well, I think that's what Joshua mentioned. I mean, at the moment, of course, the system is disrupted because you have like new products coming in, and then the system is not ready for taking them. But we have actually the same here. So Switzerland is like world champion in recycling, but we are also like at least the Europe champion in producing waste. And I mean, it goes hand in hand, right? So we have facilities, and the very sad thing is that, for example, there is a waste burning facility, and they don't want to recycle, because if people are starting recycling, the waste burning facility, which they put a lot of money in, like there is no waste to burn, right? So then we created a system with a lot of money, with like people who are employed, and they are now like, of course, are a very strong force against this changes of like going zero waste, of like recycling. And I mean, this is just really sad to see that despite we thought we have like a system in place for our products, the time, like the world is just changing so fast, and now we are stuck with this, with these facilities of burning waste, and we want to move forward because our city committed to be like a 2000 watt society, committed to zero waste, committed to like net zero 2050. I mean, they want to get out of it, but they created a system which is not letting them go. And I think I really hope that others are not doing these mistakes, because at the moment there is a lot of a lot of like movement also like around building like these burning facilities, and it's just like everyone will be stuck at the exact same place again. And if we put so much money, like why can we not put this money into like product, or like into innovation around zero waste? How we can have refill like bottles or whatever, like you can refill and so on. So it's really sad to see that we are stuck there. So I think what we can learn, probably like we have to first unlearn a lot of things to then be able to grasp what we have lost over the last years. I was probably not born when it was better, because I'm 24 years old. But our parents and the other generation, they know about it, and they should teach us about it, that we can reinvent what we have lost over the years.
Thank you. Joshua, what do you think where you are? You said there's a lot of Western garbage coming in, and how do people feel about that? Is there a lot of opposition? Is there a movement growing? What are attitudes like there about that?
It's it's not positive entirely. It depends on which side of the table you sit. For the person who is processing the waste, this is a livelihood, right? So there's waste coming in from Europe, from the US, coming into Ghana. I mean, we host one of the biggest dump sites in the world when it comes to electronic waste. So, and there's a huge community around this, and we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of people who are relying on this electronic waste coming into their country, having to process it and making a livelihood out of it. It's bad. It has to change, but there has to be a transition approach which allows them to also have a livelihood while changing the system. And again, this is something that the industry itself has largely ignored. The products which are coming in are from global brands. We're talking about Microsoft, we're talking about Apple, Samsung, Motorola. We have all these LG, all these big brands, and they know their products are there, but they're not taking responsibility for it because there's no proper supply chain analysis of life cycle of products. And when these analyses are done, they are done in a very exclusive environment. So you do it for, say, Europe, and that is it, right? How the product move out of Europe and end up somewhere in Sudan, nobody really cares about that. And this is something that the regulation should not be left to the recipient country, say Ghana, to deal with this alone. It should be done together with the industries, the manufacturers themselves, to see how do we have a transparent supply chain where you put out 10,000 products per day, and you know that you have a capacity of managing those same 10,000 products when they reach end of life. And this is the same thing that applies to plastics. I mean, Coca-Cola is doing great. We're supporting some initiatives here and there, but look at the amount of bottles, the quantity of bottles you put out every day. So if you set up one recycling plant in one big city, you've done nothing. But yet this sits in sustainability report, they get hailed and everyone clap for them. This is amazing. They put up one recycling plant. But we should look at how much waste you put on the market and how much capacity or investment is going into you taking that product back and repurposing it. And if you can't do that, they don't put it on the market. And this is how policies should really look at. Because once it gets out there and you create a situation where people make a livelihood out of it. And I see that in Europe and in the US, there are so many reports that talks about child labor, right? Talks about child labor, using children on farms, using children in production centers. And it's difficult to solve because once you get communities to start living off these processes and these activities, it becomes a livelihood. So one side, it has to stop. The other side is they want to do it because this is how they make money. So you criticize and involving child in all these things, yes. But at that point, it's also what they do to make a living. And the best way to do that is to transform it in a way that you sustain the supply chain, but you make sure that there's huge investment into this latter part, which is normally hidden from what we know from these companies. But put more investment there to engage in skills development, in proper working conditions, issuing contracts. And COVID has taught us a big lesson that Africa has a lot of informal economy that you can't even have proper data on it. And when you have a huge informal economy with little data, even when you have aid money to spend, you don't know how to spend it because you lack data on who you are going to serve, how many people, what do they do, and how do you best reach them. So all these things are things that forms into the bigger economy. And again, Marie-Claire said, investment is really needed to go to where it's most needed. And Keroles said, brainwashing, all these company report sustainability initiatives from all this private sector and multinationals. We need to be a bit more critical, and we need to be more careful how we praise them when they do the least of nothing.
Right.
You know? And rather push more pressure for them to really focus on delivering commitment based on how much product they put on the market, how much profit they are making, and making sure that everything that comes out, there is a strategy for when that product reaches end of life.
Right. All right, thanks, Joshua. I think we have time for just a couple of questions, Betty. I see there are a couple of questions on Facebook. Do you want to choose one?
Okay, thank you very much to the speakers. Joanne, thank you so much. That was quite an interesting facilitation from your end. I love one particular question you raised, and that is what they would love to see. But I think the question should align in this way. What are they doing in terms of personally, organization-wise, CSO? What are they doing actually to make change in terms of food security, waste reduction, and sustainability? So I'd like to know, Marie-Claire, what are you doing to cause a change in your sector where you are? Yes.
So you mean with the universities?
Yes, university-wise, personal, yes.
I mean, maybe like I started like with me as a person, like many years ago, and then I quickly realized that despite I'm like doing all of these changes, it's not going to help like the way I wish it would help. And this is like the point when I started to be also active on a policy level. This is when I started to be active on a university level. And I think this is like a personal journey. Probably everyone is doing, and everyone is starting from a different end. But I think what is very important is also to like connecting the different sectors. So it's not only possible to change, for example, if you do like one sector at the university, but there is also the policy level. And just like, because there was one comment on like policies, one question on like policies which are which actually would be there, but they're not implemented. And I think this is like so important, because if we have like, in politics is like fast changing, and university, I mean, like you implement some things, but then they're not going anywhere. So it's very important to hold people accountable, and this also needs to be done like through cross-sector sectoral like agreements, because no sector alone can get it done. So even if we focus on the university and try to improve them, this is never going to be enough, and we have to like watch out to build like solid partnerships and networks.
So another question comes in where Pamela asks, how can we make the foreign shipments of our waste more visible and Canada more accountable for this shipment? I think this question should go to Joshua, our Foreign Minister for Environment.
That's a nice comment. Thank you. How do we make these shipments more visible? The challenge is that it requires a bit of research to document this, because in advocacy, what you don't want to do is sort of naming and shaming with the wrong data, because then it comes back to you and it makes every argument that comes afterwards invalid. The challenge is that the industry is very, very good with hiding this information and communicating it in other forms. So when they are shipping electronic waste from, say, somewhere in Europe to Africa, sometimes it comes through, they are documented as functioning computers, sometimes as donations to schools who don't have computers. So they always have a good connotation to it. They arrive, and after, might say, 3 months to 6 months, they are all broken down. You can't fix them. You can't do anything. It's end of life, which means that the research to find this information clearly, if you focus on, waste shipment from, say, Canada to Ghana, you might probably not find anything. But if you look into what are the sort of materials that are being exported from Canada to Ghana, right? What is the life cycle at the time that they are leaving Canada till the time they arrive in Ghana? And this is how you find this information. Again, then it requires investment into such research, such that you can really take the time to map the full chain to see when it left, when it arrived, how long it took before it got broken, and what happens when it gets broken. And this will require sort of a bit of funding for a dedicated research like this. So this is one way to go about it. But I think another way is also that we as young people to really campaign around these things. When you find products where you think, how come this product manufactured in Switzerland, it's in Ghana, and it's end of life and sitting down here being burnt, right? Who is responsible for this? And the more these questions are raised, the more important it becomes. But so far, I think what is happening is typically focusing on the waste that has already arrived in Africa, sitting on the dump site and saying something must be done, and not looking at where it came from, who produced it, and the journey that it went through before coming to the dump site. So this is one thing. The second thing I'll quickly say, because a comment around what do we do when policies are not being implemented, what can young people do? My best advice, look at the policy, do it yourself, and then communicate that you are implementing the policy. Because these policies are there for it to be done, and typically the government or responsible agencies do not have the capacity, or they're not doing their job well. And if you follow these policies and implement it through your own initiative, then communicate that, because this is also how you show that this policy can be implemented. It's also a way of you getting your way into these government spaces to be able to function over there. And we're not going to get young people into policy if you are just going to sit down and just talk. So sometimes we need to do these things when the policies are already set and we know that it's a good policy. We implement it, we communicate it, and say, we are doing it. How can we do more? How can you support us to do more? And this is how you sort of advocate, by saying that I'm doing it and this has to be done. And again, accountability. If you set a policy which says 5 years time, we need to reduce your waste reduction by 40%, and there's nothing done after 5 years, then you need to start asking questions and calling and knocking the doors and asking, what is the state of this policy and where are we with that? And these are some of the ways that we can really get responsible agencies on their toes.
Okay, well said, Joshua. This question goes to Kerole. How do you influence leaders to go from just documented waste management policies to adequate implementation? So Kerole, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to answer this quickly because I think we have to wrap up soon, sadly. But essentially, what the approach that we have had at Concordia is one that we're not out there to do PR for anybody. So we work with administration and work with everybody at Concordia, but we have to be very careful. One, that we're not out to make anyone look good or bad. We're not doing PR, and we're not out to demonize everything that moves. And we really try to be very governed with data. So if the data in fact says that something is happening well, so there's nothing wrong with flattery. And when things are happening wrong, we say that as well. And we try to be as transparent as possible. No sensationalizing, none of that. It's really just communicating the facts, whether they're good or bad. And I think this is the critical point here is if you see a policy not being implemented, say that it's not being implemented, and make sure that everybody else knows that it's not being implemented. And you have to demand evidence-based approach and evidence-based policy, because for example, part of the sustainability plan at Concordia is a waste plan, but Concordia didn't have a waste audit since 2013. What's evidence-based in that plan, and how do you make sure that the community has any faith that this plan is going to work, and what kind of credibility does it have? And we're a university out of all things. So I think we just have to be very transparent and be governed with data and objective and make sure that we're demanding evidence-based policy. Well, so thank you everybody, and thank you for everybody who attended.
I have an ending quote for everyone,
Please.
and which is, respect for food is respect for life, for who we are and what we do.